All right, good morning, everyone. We're going to get started with our post-development stormwater work session. I'm Howard Shook, Vice Chair of the Utilities Committee. Matt Westmoreland is joining us. Others may or may not be along. Effectually, we're on recess, so I'm here under protest. Our chair is indisposed and was suddenly unable to make the meeting, and we hope he's doing well. And all right, we've got a agenda in front of us. Well, let's just jump right into it. Commissioner, take it away.
Hey, good morning, Councilmember Shook, Councilmember Westmoreland, Makita Browning, Commissioner for Department of Watershed Management. This morning, we're presenting updates for the department's post-development stormwater ordinance relating our proposed provisions relating extended detention. The first stormwater controls were adopted in the 1970s. In 2004, Department of Watershed Management adopted the Metro District's model. And then in 2013, we adopted revisions that incorporated green infrastructure measures, received multiple awards and accolades, and to date, we have permitted over 7,000 sites of green infrastructure practices equating to over 1 billion gallons of polluted stormwater runoff removed from our infrastructure and streams each year. The basis for the ordinance is to establish water quality standards for removing pollutants before discharge related to new development. Establish detention standards to control the rate of discharge of stormwater to water bodies, and require planning and approval processes, alternative compliance criteria, inspections and related compliance during new construction, and operations and maintenance agreements for compliance post-construction. In fall of 2020, Department of Watershed Management instituted additional updates to the ordinance relating regulatory requirements per the Metro District model and our MS4 stormwater permit and some other general housekeeping items. As part of the 2020 updates, we contemplated provisions regarding extended detention, but we paused on proceedings so that we could perform additional engineering analysis to determine the best approach, and convened a Stormwater Technical Advisory Committee consisting of a diverse group of internal and external stakeholders, including developers, engineers, and our internal technical team members. We wanted to get a little bit more input and perspective on how extended detention would affect particularly affordable housing. This morning, we'll be presenting the output of our Technical Advisory Committee, specifically related to extended detention. So the contents this morning will be covering what has changed in the ordinance, what is the stormwater extended detention, why is stormwater detention important, what are the proposed changes to the stormwater detention ordinance, why is a change in the ordinance needed, how is the proposed ordinance derived, where will the proposed stormwater detention ordinance apply, and what are the benefits. At this time, I will turn it over to my Deputy Commissioner of the Office of Watershed Protection, Deputy Commissioner Alex Mahajer, to step through the presentation.
Good morning, Councilors. Alex Mahajer, Office of the Watershed Protection. Well, what has changed in the ordinance? This is basically an enhancement. The purpose of this is to enhance our existing infrastructure without changing them. To enhance their performance, hydraulic performance of them without changing. So the application of the stormwater measures changed, and the extended detention requirements. These were all put in back in 2003 in the Georgia Design Manual. And some of the examples are shown over there as the best management practices, or BMPs, such as bioswales and permeable pavers, and a detention basin. This is to a prioritized measures, changes to allow flexibility in stormwater measure applications. Previously, our codes required during the development or prior to the development for a series of best management practices to be proposed in the construction drawings in a certain order if they are feasible. And so what this ordinance does is still meets all the requirements of the Georgia Design Manual, and as these BMPs were put in to make sure that we meet all of our water qualities. However, based on site-specific cases, maybe one best management practice would be preferred or the other, but the results are that all the requirements will be met. And these are through our dealings with a lot of our developers and their concerns, and that if this is something possible. So this basically still meets all the requirements. However, it makes it more flexible. Then the idea of what is stormwater extended detention. Extended detention is to capture and store and controlled release of stormwater generated in the city during the rain. The detention can be in open basins, in ponds, or in underground vaults and tanks. Basically, what it does is the purpose of stormwater control as far as the water quality and or flood control is to mimic situations that after the development of a given site, still the observer at the point of discharge will not see any adverse effect of flooding and or increase in the level of pollutants. So these are, by definition, as stormwater management is what has a one prong of water quality, and the other one flood control or water quantity. Well, to mention why is the stormwater detention important, as we just mentioned, new developments often have, new development without any controls, they usually have negative effects on both water quality and quantity, as you mentioned. The additional impervious surfaces cause increase in peak flows. These are the examples of the adverse effects. And total runoff volume, which can increase urban flooding risks. Further, the additional runoff picks up greater concentration of many pollutants. As a result, the waters of the state or our waters running for the city are degraded. The extended detention is an approach to help reduce these impacts for new development as far as the water quality and or flood control water quantity goes. Currently, the way our design criteria calls for is a given development, within their BMPs, they have to adhere to requirements for water quality, as you see in blue in the bottom, which is a 1.2 inches of runoff, or basically that is the first flush, when the rain comes and it stops. So what happens is it causes all the pollutants, oils and greases and debris and all to wash into the system. So currently what we have is to detain and control the 1.2 inches of rainfall, first rainfall, which is for the water quality for a time of 24 hours. And then above that, we see 3.34 inches. These are for the 1 year storm. That happens, the depth of that is 3.34 inches, and that 1 year storm is also labeled as channel protection, meaning when we have areas that the development is discharging into the open channel, holding that 1 year storm, which is 3.34 inches of rain for 24 hours, it allows the channel bank not to get degraded. So this is what we have right now currently. And then why is a change in ordinance needed? As we mentioned, the current ordinance includes a capture of 3.34 inches as a 1 year storm of rainfall in the channel. Currently, that's what we have. What we are proposing is, in the bottom, as you observe, is still 1.2 inches of rain for water quality, no change with that. And then, if you recall, we had 3.34 inches of rain for 1 year storm. So what we propose is to cut that in half to 1.7 inches, and then add them up together so they become 1.7 plus 1.2 is 2.9. And instead of holding it for 24 hours, we hold it for 48 hours. The reason for it is that our existing system, specifically in highly urbanized areas, that what we have is we have a system of infrastructures that they are most combined or separate. As the rain event happens, previously, if these inches of rain was hitting the system to be detained for 24 hours, now we're proposing this to be 48 hours. So as a result, it allows the existing system more time to convey the storm flow without getting choked up and cause flooding. And we see that in highly urbanized area that happens all the time. And the system is the same, but what this does is attenuates the time of release from 24 hours to 48 hours, allowing the system to digest this stormwater and pass it without creating flooding. So this is the changes. The 24 hours go to 48 hours, 3.34 inches is cut in half. Well, as I mentioned, this ordinance does not apply in suburban areas, because in the suburban areas, when we discharge the water, the stormwater into the open channel, we need that channel protection fully at 3.34 inches, because the purpose of the 1 year storm or channel protection volume is to protect the channels, to reduce the scouring effect of the water or to protect the channel's sites. However, what we are proposing is this ordinance to be only applicable to highly urbanized area where we are discharging into a closed conduit system, which most probably could be the combined sewer. As a result, there is no channel to protect, and that's why we are proposing a half of 3.34 inches, which is 1.7. Now, what we did was to validate that, we did a pilot study, and we took a series of developments, and an average of half an acre site, if you see in this graph, what happens is we have two graphs, one in blue and one in green. And in blue is what we have as is existing per existing ordinance. So for the half an acre, we see a higher peak, which that causes the system to malfunction in highly urbanized area. As a result, when we model this system to green, we saw that the peak is reduced, allowing the system to pass the stormwater in a safer way, and also it requires less of a detention pond, which is good for development. So they don't need to create something which is oversized, not necessarily applicable to highly urbanized area, but as a result, everybody wins. And so what it does is actually produces more volume to control and treat and reduces the peak. So that is the validation that our assumption for highly urbanized area is working, and this ordinance is warranted. As I mentioned, those areas where the the sample sites were taken and as a model, and we analyzed that through our hydraulic modeling, and the results were favorable and validated. Again, as we mentioned, this ordinance is only applicable to highly urbanized areas, which mostly is we are discharging into a closed conduit system, and we don't have an open channel to protect. So we still would fall within the rules and regulations of the our NPDES program, which is the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, as enforced by the Georgia EPD. And it works. Well, the benefits, as we mentioned, is it reduces the peak, increase the volume, increase the attenuation of the storm flow the treatment, and it holds back till the system has time to safely convey the system, and it still meets all the requirements of the Georgia Design Manual. And what we proposed was not a one-size-fits-all. For highly urbanized area, this is what this proposal is, but again, for suburban areas, we still stay with what we had in the past.
All right.
So with that, if there are any questions.
All right, thank you. We've been joined by Mr. Dozier. Ms. Norwood has joined us virtually. And does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, it does.
All right, we'll recognize Mr. Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and thank you to all of y'all for coming out today to talk about this very important and timely issue. I know y'all have been really hitting the ground running over the last 6 months or so since we had the big rainfall event back in September, and I love that we're looking at all of our policy tool opportunities to address this long term. I know that the post-development stormwater or post, let me get that, the post-development stormwater detention ordinance was, we were originally looking at making changes to it 3-4 years ago. I believe that legislation was held in committee. What substantially is different in this legislation versus what was originally proposed a few years ago, if anything?
Well,
So no change to what was enacted in 2020. This is an additive. We proceeded with all of the recommended provisions back in 2020. The extended detention topic was contemplated, but we paused on it. We wanted to do more engineering analysis. As you know, we convened a technical advisory committee consisting of a diverse group of technical professionals, developers, engineers, to really kind of understand how this policy would affect new development, specifically affordable housing. So this was just a piece of it that we paused on to do more analysis and come forth with a policy change or addition that we felt would be feasible for new development, specifically within the combined system. So the existing policy that affects separate portions of the system will still remain, but this change is specific to the need to change how we detain flows, how new development detains stormwater flows within the combined system. Because as you know, we have very large pipes, combined flows that go through, lots of volumes of flow, wanting development to do their part, but also allowing something that would give them a little bit of a relax of being able to detain flow just a little bit longer, as DC Mahadra stated, so that the system can rebound after an event and then slowly discharge flows into the system. So.
And with the previous discussion on post-detention, I can't remember what the specific, 100-year rainfall event versus the amount of time that was the stormwater was required to be detained as part of that ordinance. Any significant changes in terms of those sorts of that analysis in terms of the amount, the volume, the scale of events and that sort of thing, or?
Scale of events are about the same. Of course, we look at 50 years worth of rainfall data, but I think the additive or the benefit for this is in 2020, we were contemplating, detention for 24 hours. Now it's 48 hours, which gives them a little bit more time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then my other question is with regards to the locations y'all have identified for this ordinance to impact. How did y'all determine, I guess, how are y'all identifying which areas are more ripe for this ordinance to apply to versus others, recognizing that I know, particularly on the Beltline in my district, along in West End, in Westview, there is rapid urbanization happening through new, like Lee and White, and then that developer just acquired a property just adjacent to it that they're looking at doing like 300 units of housing and other sorts of things that would potentially have some significant impact on the Utoy Creek watershed. I'm just curious, why not look at those sorts of future growth areas and include that in this overlay?
We looked at it citywide, and so basically what it comes down to is this extended detention policy really affects just the combined system for the maps, which is the core of the city. Separate areas, you've got pure channel protection. The flows are going to discharge to a creek or a stream. Within the combined system, all of the historical creeks and streams have now been piped, so it's being discharged to a closed conduit. And because of that, that's the reason why we want to have some added level protection through this detention requirement.
Yeah, so it's not just the urbanization, it's also the type of infrastructure that's in place.
It's the type of, yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
got it. Thank you. That's all I have.
All right, let me try to understand the process that's kind of led us to where we are here. Did this come out of the metropolitan North Georgia district, or is this something that the city did in-house that they then reviewed, or was their review necessary?
No, basically, all of our proposals is meeting all the North Metro District as well as the our NPDES requirements, because all of these BMPs are shown in the Georgia Design Manual. So we are not deviating at all from the requirements, and we meet all the requirements. However, in the past, or even in the past, there were cases, I don't recall here, but the other jurisdictions, that if the discharge was directly into the closed conduit system, something like this was favorable to look at, but it never took place. So we, to respond back to your question, we meet all the requirements. There is no deviations or lessening the requirements, but it's just innovatively looking at it differently since we are discharging into a closed conduit, where the concept of the water, the channel protection, which is a one-year storm, it can be massaged. However, higher frequencies from a 2-year to 100-year storm, there is no changes. It has to meet all the requirements as before.
Okay, so let me see if I'm getting this right. So our current standards and requirements, were originally, I guess, blessed by and/or came out of the water district. However, we just simply chose to go about it in a slightly different way that we're now proposing to modify. So these proposed modifications don't require additional review by the district, but we would just simply have to ordain the update, correct?
Correct. So we're compliant with the Metro District's model requirements for post-development stormwater. It's simply because our system is different from any other. We've got a very urbanized makeup of our city and system. Other jurisdictions don't have combined sewers. So we had to take a slightly different approach to how we deal with discharge in a combined system.
So now let's go back in time a little bit. You know, sometimes I get frustrated by my inability to remember things. Often I'm more frustrated because I do remember certain things. The program we have now, we were pitched. I'll never forget the promise that once a parcel was newly developed or redeveloped under the proposed system, which is what we have now, there will be less, not more water runoff than previously existed. So I guess I need to square that with your statement that, you know, new development often has negative effects, but that shouldn't have happened based on what we adopted for the reasons we adopted it, correct?
Correct, and the ordinance, you know, as it's written, is working across the city. It holistically does work. But as we look at climate change, as we look at the urbanization and the growth within the core of the city, we're looking at how the combined system functions under wet weather conditions. We recognize that it's important for new development to have some additional level of safety and protection and detain more flows for a longer period of time.
Okay, so the benefits then are supposed to appear in the form of a more sort of gentle release over a longer period of time of what's detained, which we think will have a spillover effect, no pun intended, in possibly reducing some housing costs, building costs that otherwise get passed along.
It would allow more system capacity, allow the system the capacity to convey more flows and not be as quickly inundated with the discharge of flows from development. Okay. And then I'll conclude by piggybacking on Mr. Dozier's inquiry. Buckhead is not considered highly urbanized. That's news to me. Buckhead is very urbanized. Buckhead is in a separate portion of the city and the system.
Well, I know we're not in the CSO.
We're not in the CSO.
But it seems to me that some of these benefits shouldn't be restricted to CSO only.
So the ordinance as original, which relates to the separated portions of the system, there's still going to be, in effect, that detention of the first flush, which reduces the amount of pollutants, and as well as channel protection, because within separate areas of the system, stormwater flows are discharged into open channels and creeks and streams. And so when we're dealing with new development, we're looking very keenly at what measures they're proposing. As DC Mahajer mentioned, we're relaxing, you know, how they select those measures, and it can be a multitude of measures that they can select, but we're making sure that they're detaining the right amount of flow so that it doesn't negatively impact the system, even in a separate area.
I'm going to have to pray on that. We've been joined by the council president, who I believe has some questions or comments.
Thank you, Councilmember Shook. Good morning. Thanks for your presentation. And thanks to Twitter and Channel 26 for letting me listen in while I was on my way. I want to start broadly and then work a little more specifically. In your opinion, what is the trade-off we're making? What is the downside, if any, of the change that's being proposed?
Good morning, Alex Mahajer, Office of the Watershed Protection. There is no downsides, or there is nothing that we lose. This ordinance is nothing but gains for us. Basically what it does is good for the developer because they end up with a smaller detention, more economical for them, is good for the city because it attenuates the volume is the same, but it attenuates the rate of volume per unit time from 24 hours to 48 hours, allowing our existing system without any change to be able to hydraulically convey this hydraulic loading without getting choked up. Because a lot of time in areas that is impervious areas a lot, our system gets choked on a very small storm frequencies. So this is a both win for developers per our modeling and us, allowing our system to have a more time to convey.
So just a follow-up that you mentioned, is it fair to say that the proposed ordinance would make it less expensive for a developer to meet the obligations under this arena?
Yes.
Is that because they would have more choices, or is that because, in essence, we're lowering the maximum that they have to retain?
Both.
Okay.
Both. As far as the more choices is, as we mentioned, when a development takes place, in general, the development has to take all the stormwater management, which has two sides to it: the water quality, which are a series of best management practices or BMPs, such as rain garden, bioswales, grass strips, and all that. In the past, we prioritized that. We said we need this one first, this one second, this one third. So now what it does, it says as long as they meet the intent of the Georgia Design Manual, because all these BMPs are equally weighted, and there is like a menu. They don't have to take A, B, C, D. They can take whatever part of this menu that fits to their site specifics. So from water quality, it's more flexible, is easier time on the developers, and for water quantity, what it does is it reduces the size of their detention pond, and by just allowing more time to pass.
And just to add to that, a little bit of the current rigidity of the ordinance, the ABCD, we got a lot of feedback from developers about that, and so we listened to their, their comments or feedback and wanted to provide more flexibility.
I'm not a hydrologist, so the way that I think about this is trying to think about specific examples. So let's take an area like Memorial Drive, an enormous amount of development. We've seen a lake-like effect happen on Memorial Drive at times, depending on the volume of rain. If this ordinance had been in place when Memorial went through its development cycle over the last 5 years, do you think we would have seen less of those major events?
Yes, we would see less of adverse events. However, this ordinance only comes to 1 year storm. Major events is usually a higher frequency storm on a 25, 50, or 100 year storm. And, but definitely, if this was put in years back before developers would have a smaller facilities, more flexibility for the city, allowing the existing system to route the hydraulic loadings.
Okay, so just in layman's terms again, let me just make sure I have it in my mind. On a month-to-month basis, this would improve the overall stormwater management. It would be less expensive to implement this ordinance, in your opinion, and it would lead to a better outcome for the system, because the system would not be as overwhelmed as often, and it would lead to a better outcome for the developers, because they would have more flexibility. And so basically on a month-to-month, not a 10-year, 100-year kind of rain, that's a different kind of issue. We've talked about that and some of the major things we're doing. But in your opinion, this would actually lead to better outcomes because we would be having them put their resources more in retention on a longer time frame than on a higher maximum time frame.
Absolutely.
That fair?
As you mentioned, month to month. Well, there is this formula, 1 over T times 100. So if it is a 1 year storm, 1 over 1 times 100, that means the occurrence of a 1 year storm is pretty much high every time it rains. So to further support your statement, we may even have these events more frequent than monthly. So this is a front-end shield which receives the stormwater, attenuates it for 48 instead of a 24, slow releases it. So the receiving stream down from the basin doesn't get choked because it's receiving all other tributaries. So this is exactly what is the.
So just help me understand page 11, which seems to be sort of the key page of the analysis. The difference between green and blue lines, which are the blue line being the existing ordinance and green being the proposed ordinance, at that 4 or 5 hour level, what happens to that in the new world? What happens to that flow? What used to be captured by blue is now not being captured by green. That doesn't overwhelm the system in the front?
No, it doesn't. Basically, what this model does is the winning key is the attenuation and reducing the peak. So still 1 year storm is a 1 year storm, 3.34 inches. That doesn't change. The volume is still the same. What it does is, with this recommendation, our peak discharge is reduced, and the length of discharge is increased in time. So as a result, the developer needs less of cubic feet or cubic yard of volume, which makes it more economical for them. And then our existing system is allowed to digest this instead of a 24 hours to 48 hours.
So said another way, again, in my layman's terms, the system can handle the difference between the blue peak and the green peak just fine. It has more trouble dealing with the long tail of which now the green peak is or the green tail is gonna take care of, which the developer in essence is gonna be holding back from the system. That's a better trade-off from the system perspective.
Exactly. So what this shows is, under the blue peak, we may have system failure. On the green peak, we may not have system failure.
So you're not gonna have system failure because of the short term, but more on the long term.
Right. In the same peak, shorter term, causes system failure is blue. Less peak, longer time of discharge is green, which is our proposal for 1 year storm only, which allows the system not to choke and not to fail.
Okay. So let me follow up on Councilmember Shook's question. So is the current ordinance for the non-urban, as you've called them, the suburban areas, is it working? Do we see when you don't have a closed system and you're allowing the flows to the streams and otherwise to be the outlet, is that, in your opinion, working well today?
Absolutely it does. We haven't had any problems. We were involved in development of the Georgia Design Manual back in 2003, and since then we haven't heard any malfunction of the system or our methodology at that time it came, and it really does work.
And there's no notion that in a place like Buckhead or a place like Councilmember Dozier mentioned at Leah White or some of these other areas that we do see an enormous amount of development that is not in the closed system, we don't believe that that is going to peak in a way that's going to overwhelm the non-closed system approach that we have?
Not at all, because we have other measures such as our 10% rule, which I explain in a second, but this is for a 1 year storm, which is for channel protection, for the sides of the channel not to get scoured. And that is on a given channel by observation. If you see it half full running, that's your 1 year storm. So anything above that, no changes. And if it discharges into the open channel, no changes. The only thing is if it discharges into the closed conduit, it could be which most probably for us is the combined sewer, which there is no channel. So we took advantage of that to benefit the developers as well as allowing our system to breathe.
Good. Thank you. That's all I have. I appreciate very much the answers. Thank you, Mr. Chuck.
Thank you. Mr. Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Just have one more quick question. Recognizing that these areas that y'all have identified already have a lot of development that's already taken place, I recognize this ordinance will only impact new development. Are there any programs or any sort of communication with existing property owners to potentially retrofit or to make upgrades to get them up to the level that we're trying to put in place for future development? I don't know if there's any precedent for that, but it's something I think about when we have these huge stormwater events. Yes, it's awesome that we have new development coming that could potentially take advantage of these changes, but the permits for Centennial Yards have already been issued. The permits for, even with South Downtown and things like that have already been issued. So just kind of want to.
Very good question. So this does allow a chance for retrofit because we are currently in a process of analyzing the feasibility of a stormwater utility user fee. And as a result, within that, since the user fee is going to have a system of credits against the fee, so if a developer decides to retrofit their facility, they're able to take this credit on an annual basis. So it is an incentive for retrofitting as well as new development.
All right, does anyone have anything else? What's your timetable to have us consider this?
It will probably be early summer. We want to have some discussions with other external stakeholder organizations just to get additional feedback. Not sure which cycle, but it'll probably be early summer timeframe.
And was there a formal group of developers and/or consultants with whom you worked to develop this?
We did. We were very intentional. Again, we wanted to make sure that we had a diverse group that participated in the Stormwater Technical Advisory Committee. Councilman Dozier, both yourself and Councilman Bakhtiari were participants. We looked at, again, large developers, small developers, specifically developers that are part of, that are fostering affordable housing, and also some of the known developer engineers that work on these types of installations and perform these types of analysis. So, and community engineers as well, to be a part of the discussion and helping to develop the policy that we're proposing today.
All right, I appreciate your use of modeling to test some of these assumptions. It means a lot to me. All right, if there's nothing else from my colleagues, we are going to stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.